Hello,
Hello,
my name is Demaray,
and I'm Sarah.
and together we are the Laser Girls.
That we are.
We're here to break down our costumes today. There will be a video about me and my costume I was San this year from Princess Mononoke, but we're here to talk about Sarah, this one.
Hello.
Sarah was Lunafreya from Final Fantasy 15. So tell me a little bit about what elements of your costume this year were 3D printed.
I guess just with a little bit of background on my overall look of my costume. I obviously did Luna from Final Fantasy 15,
Yes.
but I did a very different. Specific's a better word.
Yes.
Interpretation of her.
Yes.
There's an image of her in the game, and Demaray laughs because I do this all the time. There's an image of her in the game that shows up for about 10 seconds.
Is it really 10 seconds?
It's a very short period of time. It is her from the waist up.
Yep.
It is a painting, so it's not even
a picture of her.
It's not even like a 3D.
It's a painting.
Anything. It's the most obscure picture of Luna
Yep.
that I could find because that's what I do to myself. And it's her in this full, beautiful kind of high priestess garb as she's processing with her trident through a crowd to probably do some sort of oracle miracle because she's
some water into wine type situation.
Because she is the blood of the oracle and she communicates with gods and does all that awesome stuff because she is a beautiful, elegant badass.
Yes.
And I love her for that.
Yes.
And I did feel like the game kind of ripped her away from me before I could get to know her.
From all of us, yes.
From all of us, before I got to know her a little bit more. And I felt like with this costume, I wanted to give her the attention and the dedication that I felt like she deserved. And I really took that quite seriously because I was definitely not happy with her fate. Square Enix in the game. But that's for another story.
Talking to you, Square Enix.
But let's get down to business and talk about how I made stuff.
Sure.
Because that's why we're all here, right? I guess we'll start with the main event, which is her trident. It's a beautiful piece. I really like its uniqueness within the Final Fantasy universe. You don't really see, when you think about kind of the iconic Final Fantasy weapons, the trident really stands out in look and feel. And that was kind of my main draw to it. When I saw Luna standing there, communing with Leviathan, it had a different presence to it, and I knew as soon as I saw it in the game, I was like, that is what I'm gonna make. I'm gonna make that thing. I constructed the entire trident in SolidWorks. It was one giant assembly. I started it out how I normally start out my SolidWorks sketches with a vector drawing that I made in Illustrator. I bring that into SolidWorks as a DXF or DWG, and then I make it 3D and do what I need to do with it. The only part of the trident that I didn't make in SolidWorks was the wing piece on the bottom of the trident that I sculpted in ZBrush, and then I meshed that piece with the piece that it was supposed to be attached to. I did the majority of the pieces with revolutions, and then the trident head was the hardest only because it was so detailed, and I did all of the sketching and the extruding in SolidWorks itself that I thought my computer was going to burst into flames, but it held up and came out better than I ever thought it would. I printed all of the trident parts in a FDM style 3D printer in ABS plastic. That decision was made because it's more durable, it's less expensive, and it's just overall going to hold up a lot better practically than plastics I've used in the past. The ABS also has a little more tooth to it than plastics that I've used in the past, so I didn't have any issues with paint chipping off or actual pieces of the plastic chipping off because the ABS is just overall more durable and can withstand weather a little better, and just overall was a significantly better choice. I was afraid because of the FDM style that the striations in my prints were going to be too apparent and were going to be distracting on the overall piece, but with a little bit of sanding, to my pleasant surprise, because this was my first time doing the whole shebang in ABS, ended up coming out beyond my expectations, and I ended up really liking having some of the striations in it, because I like that level of little bit of imperfection, and you know, kind of showing that 3D printing signature is also really nice to see on parts. But believe it or not, the Trident is not my favorite piece. I always like the smaller pieces that I make a little more than the big commanding piece. And this year, that piece was my headpiece that I made. This piece took a lot of different forms. I didn't have a very big base to work off of. As I mentioned, I had that one picture that I was working off of, and her headpiece in that image, I didn't like it all, to be frank. I thought it looked like a diaper. It looked too much like a nun's habit. I wanted to kind of put a spin on it where it still had that kind of priestess feel, but was a little more rooted in the game lore and didn't feel as arbitrary. That's kind of really how I felt about the original source material. What I ended up doing was I traced in Illustrator, I did some vector drawings of the cover of the Cosmogony book that is in Final Fantasy 15. Essentially, in a nutshell, this Cosmogony book holds the story of the gods and the astrals and the role of the oracle. So I really liked the elements of the cover. I thought they would really look nice and aesthetically pleasing and would really work well as a headpiece because everyone thinks that way. So I traced those pieces, I kind of played with them, printed a lot of 2D images and cut them out and tried them on my head to get the shape that I wanted, and then in, you know, a repeat process, brought them into SolidWorks, gave them thickness, worked in some more detail, and then took those pieces, brought them into ZBrush, and this is where it got really hard, because I had this flat, intricately detailed piece that I had to remesh entirely before I was able to form it to the 3D scan that I have of my head. And the remeshing was a process because it required a lot of RAM, because I had to really up the number of polys before I remeshed, because anytime I tried to remesh at a lower poly count, I would lose all my detail, just get wiped away. So that took a lot of trial and error. Demare and I had to really work collaboratively on that to get that working. But luckily it happened. I was getting a little worried that it wouldn't. But we were able to remesh it in a way that none of the detail got lost. Then I used the S-Pen tool in ZBrush to form it to the scan of my head. I left a little room, used my discretion based on tolerances. I didn't entirely know the exact position that I was gonna wear it, or you know how it was gonna print, even if it was gonna print well. So I had to kind of I decided to make it bigger than smaller, because worst case I can pad things with foam. That's always kind of my practice, is that I'd rather make things slightly bigger than smaller, because that's a little easier to cheat than going from small to big. But I guess it depends on the part. I ended up printing this piece in strong and flexible white nylon 12 from Shapeways, and its accompanying chain was also printed in the same material from Shapeways and came out amazing. I'm totally in love with that piece. It was easy to put together. We just put some elastic around the back and it fit my head perfectly with the wig, and there was not a lot of post that was required. So that was a nice, refreshing piece to finish, because the Trident was just so laborious.
So my question for you is, what are your takeaways from this project, and what are you going to use for the next round?
I think the biggest takeaway from me is just how much more of a chess player I've become with building to scale parts. I was really surprised at how much I've grown as a modeler in this process, and how much more accurately I'm able to edit down. And I really do have a new perspective on making these costumes that I noticed in the past that I didn't have. I feel like I'm significantly more efficient. I'm only printing parts that should be printed. I'm not printing a pole and wasting time and money printing a pole. I'm using a wooden dowel rod, or I'm, using jump rings instead of 3D modeling the whole chain and things like that. I just feel like I'm at the height of my efficiency in terms of making things, which was a really nice thing for me to see in myself, because I tend to be really extra and extravagant, especially when it comes to these costumes, because I love living in that fantasy and having a lot of fun with just making all kinds of things for it and, challenging myself in that way. But I think this was more of a challenge because it's more of a challenge to edit than it is to make everything. And that was definitely a big takeaway for me. Also, I'm never buying a curly wig ever again. I'm buying pin straight wigs. Yeah. I'm buying pin straight wigs and I'm curling them myself, because styling Luna's hair with a wavy wig was really hard for me, especially because I have no idea what I'm doing with hair ever. Do you see my hair right now? It's just pulled back.
Well, I guess what you guys should do is, if you want to learn more about this process, you should check us out on our podcast, which is available on iTunes. Check us out on our Instagram, our Facebook, our Twitter, at The Laser Girls.
And, of course, at our blog at thelasergirlstudio.com,
Yes.
where we have more blog posts on how to get into 3D, tutorials, more specifics on how we made certain parts of our costume, because we really only do scratch the surface on these videos. So definitely check us out there if you want more in-depth details on anything we talked about today. All right, until next time.
Bye!
Go Laser.